They tried to silence her, told her to sit down, calm down, dress down, said she'd never be beautiful enough, never be marketable enough, never be great. So Grace Jones made it her mission to prove them all wrong, and she didn't just succeed, she exploded. But here's what most people don't know. Grace Jones met her demons early. Before the fashion, before the music, before the fame, there was fire, pressure, pain. And from that came something unbreakable. This is the story of how Grace Beverly Jones rose from the limits of Spanish Town, Jamaica, and carved a place for herself on the global stage, armed with nothing but defiance and raw power. It all began in a house filled with Bible verses and rules as rigid as steel. Before the towering cheekbones, the razor-sharp jawline, the gender-defying looks, and the unforgettable voice, there was Grace Beverly Jones, a skinny, shy little girl growing up in Spanish Town, Jamaica. And no, she wasn't born into glamour. She was born into the gospel. Grace's early world was cloaked in scripture, sermons, and strictness. Her father was a Pentecostal preacher, a fire and brimstone kind of man, and he didn't just talk about discipline, he enforced it, often with a belt in hand or a scowl that could freeze your soul. Fashion? Sinful. Makeup? Forbidden. Music that wasn't drenched in holiness? Out of the question. But the real enforcer wasn't even her father. It was Maz P., her step-grandfather, and a man Grace would later describe as the blueprint for all her early trauma. He believed children were meant to be seen and beaten, not heard. That kind of childhood doesn't just leave bruises, it shapes people. And Grace, she didn't shrink from it. She transformed because of it. Even then, in the middle of Bible readings and brutal discipline, there were glimpses of the Grace Jones the world would one day meet. A girl who could climb trees barefoot, run faster than the boys, and vanish into the Jamaican hills when the pressure got too high. Nature was her first escape, her first rebellion. When she was 13, her parents brought her to upstate New York, where her father had planted a new ministry and built a congregation. The sermons didn't stop, the rules didn't ease, but something inside Grace had already started to shift. And then came the rebellion. It started small, a little eyeliner here, a sip of alcohol there. But soon Grace was slipping into local gay clubs with her brother, mesmerized by the color, the boldness, the sheer freedom of it all. These weren't just parties. They were baptisms into a world that let her be. No judgment, no sermons, no beatings. Just glitter, lights, and the thrill of choosing who she wanted to be. While she studied Spanish at Onondaga Community College, she also fell in love with performance. A drama class turned into a theater tour. A summer in Philadelphia turned into a new life. Living in hippie communes, dancing for tips, experimenting with LSD, and diving headfirst into the counterculture of the 60s. For the first time, Grace was in control of her own story. By the time she hit 18, she was back in New York, and this time, she wasn't just the preacher's kid who got away. She was a model, signed with Wilhelmina. Paris soon called. And when Grace arrived, the fashion world didn't just accept her. It gasped. She wasn't the standard beauty, and thank God for that. Her sharp features, dark skin, and unapologetically androgynous aura were magnetic. Designers like Yves Saint Laurent and Kenzo couldn't get enough. She graced covers of Vogue, Elle, and Stern. She posed for legends like Helmut Newton and Guy Bourdin. And she didn't just wear fashion. She bent it, broke it, and rebuilt it in her image. In Paris, Grace found her tribe. Alongside fellow model Jerry Hall and actress Jessica Lange, she made the gay clubs of Paris, especially Le Sept, her playground. This wasn't rebellion anymore. It was reign. Grace Jones had gone from church pews to catwalks, from being punished for lipstick to partying with Karl Lagerfeld. She had officially divorced her upbringing, not with a press release, but with glitter, leather, and pure, fearless energy. She wasn't running from something anymore. She was running towards something bigger, and the world hadn't even seen the half of her yet. Grace Jones didn't just walk into music, she crashed through it, like a hurricane in heels. By the late 70s, she had already conquered the fashion world. Paris had crowned her a muse, but Grace was never content just posing for cameras. No, she wanted to create, to dominate, to shock. Modeling was a stage, but it wasn't her show. That changed in 1977 when she dropped her debut album, Portfolio. It wasn't subtle, it was theatrical, fierce, disco-drenched, and unapologetically queer. Grace performed every song with every fiber of her being. Every lyric was served with attitude. Every beat pulsed with defiance. She turned Edith Piaf's La Vie en Rose into a disco anthem, and suddenly, gay clubs from New York to Berlin couldn't get enough of her. She wasn't trying to blend in, and it was clear. She stood out, tall, angular, shaved head gleaming under club lights, draped in latex and attitude. While the world churned out disco queens, Grace Jones became a disco deity. Studio 54, that was her jungle. She stalked the dance floor like a panther, part art installation, part dominatrix, part alien, all legend. She wasn't trying to please anyone, and that's exactly why everyone wanted a piece of her. But she didn't stop at disco. By the early 80s, Grace flipped the script again. With albums like Warm Leatherette, Night Clubbing, and Slave to the Rhythm, she fused reggae, punk, new wave, and funk into a genre-defying sound that was all her own. And her voice? Deep, androgynous, almost otherworldly. When she sang, it wasn't to soothe, it was to command. She didn't ask for your attention, she demanded it. And then there was her image, sculpted like a Greek statue and styled like the future. Her collaborations with French graphic designer Jean-Paul Goude created visuals the world had never seen. Grace as a machine, as a panther, as a force of nature. She redefined beauty, gender, power. She was art, and she knew it. Hits like Pull Up to the Bumper, Private Life, and My Jamaican Guy weren't just bops. They were anthems. Gay men saw her as a goddess. Women saw her as liberation. Men, terrified and obsessed, often both at once. She blurred lines between masculine and feminine, black and white, human and myth. She also stormed into acting, intimidating Bond villains, smashing through walls in Conan the Destroyer, and holding her own in a Hollywood Still Uncomfortable with a black woman who couldn't be tamed. And through it all, she remained an enigma, fiercely private yet explosively public, balancing wild performances with disciplined control. Beneath the latex and legend was a woman who had earned her crown, not by being palatable, but by being unforgettable. But fame is fickle, and the world, as loud as it can cheer, can turn quiet fast. By the late 80s, the spotlight began to shift. New sounds took over the clubs, new faces claimed the covers. Grace was still a queen, but even queens get challenged. Her sound, once ahead of its time, was now seen as from another era. The media called her eccentric. Labels stopped calling. The industry moved on. The higher you rise, the thinner the air. And for Grace Jones, the 80s came with a cold, cruel wind. The clubs that once screamed her name had gone quiet. The magazines that once begged for her face were chasing new trends. And behind the scenes, the cost of being an icon, always extravagant, always evolving, started to hit hard. Grace had danced on the edge of fame, but now she was free-falling. One of the deepest cuts came not from critics or charts, but from silence, the kind that follows death. One by one, the people who helped shape her world began to disappear. Her stylists, her dancers, her makeup artists, her muses, her friends. The AIDS crisis tore through her circle like wildfire. Designers she'd laughed with, models she'd danced with, chosen family, gone in the blink of an eye. And Grace? She wasn't just mourning, she was drowning. The woman who once ruled dance floors around the globe was now watching her kingdom collapse, piece by piece. Depression crept in, the heavy, lonely kind. Not the dramatic, mascara-running kind, the quiet kind. The kind where you disappear into yourself, where the world forgets you, and for a while, you forget yourself too. But if Grace Jones had one core truth, it was this: she doesn't stay down for long. She pulled herself out slowly with the same stubborn fire that got her out of Spanish Town and into the spotlight. She reclaimed control, she rebuilt, brick by brick, stage by stage, song by song, and then, in 2008, she returned. Not quietly, not cautiously. Grace Jones came back like a thunderclap wrapped in sequins. She released Hurricane, her first album in nearly 20 years, and it was no soft re-entry. It was personal, powerful, and poetic. Grace pulled back the latex curtain just enough to show us who she really was beneath the myth. A survivor, a fighter, a woman who had clawed her way back from the edge. Songs like William's Blood and This Is gave us something we'd never had from Grace before: emotional nakedness. But she didn't stop there. She made a widely celebrated comeback performance at the massive Attack-curated Meltdown Festival in June 2008. She was 61 years old. Most stars at that age are either coasting on nostalgia tours or tucked away in glossy documentaries. But not Grace. Grace stepped onto that stage, and in true Grace Jones fashion, she hula-hooped continuously for 6 straight minutes while singing Slave to the Rhythm live. Then, the world came calling again. At 77 years old, she headlined the Blue Note Jazz Festival at the legendary Hollywood Bowl, sharing the spotlight with none other than Janelle Monáe, a torchbearer of the very rebellion Grace helped ignite decades before. But make no mistake, this wasn't some honorary stroll down memory lane. This was Grace, towering in presence, declaring herself the voice of queer revolution and meaning every word. Grace didn't come back to fit in. She came back to remind the world she never left. Truth is, Grace Jones was never meant to be understood, only witnessed. She defied genre, gender, time, expectation. From preacher's kid to gay club royalty, from fashion's fiercest face to music's most unclassifiable sound, Grace Jones carved a path so wild, no one has dared to walk it again. She is not just an icon. She is not just a rebel. She is Grace Jones. And that name, it doesn't whisper through history. It echoes. If you are interested in stories of iconic and unforgettable stars and supermodels like Grace Jones, hit the subscribe button and stick around because the next legend is just one click away.